Hello everyone, welcome to Slash Home Daily for Saturday, July 20th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about San Diego Comic-Con 2019. We're still here. Yesterday we saw a bunch of panels, we saw some premieres. This is Slash Home Editor-in-Chief Peter Scirettais, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Home Managing Editor Jacob Halland.
Hello.
And Slash Home writer Hoai-Tran Bui.
Hey everyone.
She's now a grizzled Comic-Con veteran. She gave me a thumbs up. No one on the podcast can hear that, but okay. I'm putting it out.
Yeah.
Maybe a sound effect for a thumbs up so we can just play it and people know we're good. There's maybe boing, so you hear boing. That's HT giving a thumbs up.
Yeah.
I give a lot of thumbs up when I'm recording by myself. No one can hear me.
Ooh. Okay, so yesterday in Hall H, there was a lot happening. The day started out kind of like with the Avengers Endgame victory lap, I guess is what we'll call it.
Yeah.
It started out with this panel with Marcus and McFeely, the two screenwriters of Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, and it was moderated by Jeff Goldsmith, who has this great backstory magazine. He always does these great Q&As in LA, and this one was done in Hall H, and I think the audio is online, so you can listen to the whole thing on his podcast.
Yeah, the Q&A, I think it's called, right?
Yeah, it's a good podcast if you like interviews with screenwriters. But in this panel, and I wrote this up for SlashFilm.com, they actually revealed a lot of things that were originally written in the script that didn't happen. Like the Living Tribunal was originally in the movie. I think probably the most shocking revelation is originally, while Thanos was waiting for Gamora to open up a portal to our time, or 2022.
Whenever Avengers Endgame takes place.
Yeah, the end of Endgame takes place, and his ships come in to, destroy. He went to Earth, killed everybody, destroyed Earth, killed the Avengers, and then when they opened the portal, he came through, and you could see the devastation behind him. You could see Giant Man laying in the wreckage, and in the background alongside our other heroes, and then he threw Captain America's decapitated head at him. That was cut because it was too dark.
Yeah, and I also think that this brings up a lot of questions. I think that if people already were a little confused with the idea of multiverses, they'd wonder, why is Captain America dead and also alive? So I think it just asks too many questions if you aren't paying attention.
It would have been kind of like a I'm not sure if would it have played as a twist of us seeing him going and killing the Avengers, because I guess we wouldn't know that doesn't have an effect on the future Avengers at that point. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I think the Ancient One has her big Doc Brown moment where she explains the branching timeline. So I don't know. I feel like it would have been a really shocking moment, but I also feel like it just would have made some already questionable time travel rules a little bit more questionable.
Yeah. They were asked about if Steve contradicted what the Russos said. They weren't willing to comment on record anymore. Away, and that we will probably see alternate universe or alternate timeline or Gamora in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So, there you go. Then we had the Russos panel, and HT, you covered this for the site. It was fun,
yeah,
right?
It was very much a victory lap panel, because they didn't really answer much more about Avengers Endgame than they have been talking about for the past couple months since they've been doing their victory lap press circuit. But this panel was moderated by Stephen Weintraub, and he kind of kicked things off by trying to probe whether they would be doing any more Marvel projects, even though they seem to be very eagerly looking towards the future with their new studio production company, Agbo. But he basically asked whether they would be doing or be involved in a Secret Wars movie, and they very diplomatically said, Marvel was a great time for us, maybe we'll work with them in the future, maybe it'll be Secret Wars, and it was basically a non-committal, I don't know.
And then Steve went on to ask 3 more questions about Secret Wars, and they squirmed in their seats.
Yes. So it was, they didn't talk much about Marvel except to, thank the fans and touch a little bit upon the Avengers Endgame re-release, talk about their idol James Cameron and how honored they were to be so close to him on the box office charts. But mostly they talked about their new project that they're working on with Agbo, the first of which is Cherry, which is a kind of a departure for the Russo brothers, and it's going to be reuniting them with Tom Holland in a drama based on a novel about the opioid epidemic. It's set in Cleveland, Ohio, which is the Russo brothers' hometown. And it's a drama that they said will be rated R, a more mature movie, and something that they said is, quote, doesn't have the surface level entertainment level of the Marvel movies, but is a very important story to be told. And they announced, or rather talked about several other projects, including their first animated project, Magic the Gathering, which is a Netflix animated series, and they teased could have the potential to spin off into live action if it were to be successful, as well as the Thomas Crown Affair, which unites them with Michael B. Jordan. It's a fresh take on the heist film first directed by Norman Jewison in 1968 and remade in 1999 by John McTiernan. They also talked about The Electric State, which they are involved with Agbo partners Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, the screenwriters that they've worked with frequently with Marvel. And they also revealed 2 other projects at this panel, which include Grimjack, based on the 80s indie comic book classic about a sword for hire gladiator in pan-dimensional city. I don't know much about this.
Jacob, do you know, you are the encyclopedia of comic knowledge here. Do you know anything about Grimjack?
I won't call myself an encyclopedia. I am an incomplete Wikipedia article, but I have never heard of Grimjack, and I bet most people in Hall H had not heard of Grimjack either, based on the very scattered applause when they announced it.
I had heard of it, but I've never read anything about it. So, I don't know.
It seems to be close to the Russo brothers' heart, though. Joe Russo said that this was his favorite comic book of his when he was growing up, and he had issue 1 in a box in his childhood home. And the other one that he talked about, the new title, was Battle of the Planets, which some people were more familiar with. It's going to be a new remake of the 80s animated series Battle of the Planets, which itself was based on the Japanese anime series Science Ninja Team Gatchaman.
Was that like one of those ones where we repurposed a anime and basically redubbed it and made it our own?
I think it was actually a remake.
Or it was a complete remake?
Animation.
Okay.
Yeah. But this was something that the Russo brothers grew up with, and they joked that if you can tell, we're slowly hunting down all our favorite IP from our childhood and turning that into projects.
Yeah. Jacob, do you have any thoughts on any of those announcements?
None whatsoever. I mean, it was a totally fun panel. The thing that gets lost in translation on audio is that various members of the Avengers cast sent in video questions. Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Paul Rudd, and they're all very cute and very fun. It was definitely you got to be there to enjoy this panel kind of thing.
Yeah, like Chris asking the Russos who has the best ass out of the.
Oh no, that was Paul.
Or was that Paul?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was Paul. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it was a very fun panel. But none. If the goal was to get people thrilled about future Agbo productions, I'm not sure they succeeded because they showed the trailer for 21 Bridges, which is a very generic looking cop movie. Starring Chadwick Boseman. And you can tell there was the polite applause after the trailer, but nobody in Hall H was like, I've got to go see 21 Bridges. So
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Jacob, you had to sit through 2 Walking Dead panels. I apologize. Also, apparently Chris Hardwick was hosting. I apologize again.
Yeah. If you want to know why enduring 2 hours of Chris Hardwick is a rough thing, I'd recommend Googling his history of abuse. But him coming back the Hall H is
claimed abuse.
Abuse brought on by his ex-girlfriend. So him being here at all was an uncomfortable thing, and I could tell that there was some unease in Hall H at him even being there. But anyway, as is usual, Fear the Walking Dead kicked things off because if Walking Dead went first, everybody would leave the room before Fear started. Because the tone each year for the Fear the Walking Dead panel is always, please watch our show. We're very different. We're not the same thing as Walking Dead. There's always a tinge of desperation to it. And this year was no different. The
Strangely, I've heard it's actually gotten much better than the regular show.
They killed off most of the main cast about 2 years ago, relocated from California to Austin, Texas, and apparently the show is taking on more of a Western vibe than they tried to sell in the in the panel. And to be fair, Walking Dead always cuts good trailers. And the Fear the Walking Dead trailer they show, which is for the back half of season 5, has some interesting footage, including teasing an episode where a character made a clip of her found footage, which looked really interesting. And I feel like every TV show at some point has to have their found footage documentary episode. MASH did it, ER did it, now Fear the Walking Dead is doing it. But the only real news come out of this was that Scott Gimple, who's he oversees the entire larger Walking Dead media franchise alongside Rob, the creator. He teased the new Walking Dead spin-off coming, which is actually an interesting setup. I'm not sure if it's enough to get me to watch it, which is it will be set deeper into zombie apocalypse in a walled community full of people who have grown up behind the walls in relative safety and comfort and have never known the world before the zombie apocalypse. It follows a group of young people as they set out beyond the walls on an adventure and encounter the real world for the first time. So it feels like they're trying to invest in a world where post-zombie apocalypse things have changed, which is what made the comics so interesting. Don't have faith that this could be a good show, but it sounds different enough that I'm glad it's not more of the same, which was Fear the Walking Dead's problem in its early seasons.
Are you going to watch?
No, I'm. The proper Walking Dead panel, which played after, I started having these twinges of nostalgia, like maybe it's good. Maybe I should go back in. But it's like Dead. I'd rather the people who were made happy by it stay happy with it. And as good as that season 10 trailer is, which even though Andrew Lincoln is gone and Diane Guerrero is leaving, it's so strange to see Norman Reedus be the face of The Walking Dead. I've always been the fan favorite, now he's the full-on leading man. And there was no real big news out of the proper Walking Dead panel. They showed the new trailer, they, interviews with the cast, talked about their character evolution. Robert Kirkman said that even though the comic book has ended, since the comics' final emotional arcs are about characters who are no longer on the show because they're dead or the actors have left, they're free to sort of from this point. So Walking Dead is going to keep on going forever until it stops making money. So Walking Dead season 20, we'll see you in 10 years.
Oh, there was a quite emotional goodbye for Denai Guerrero, though. Yeah,
there was people who don't read the internet seemed very surprised by her announcing that she was leaving the show. Lots of gasps throughout Hall H.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but everybody seemed genuinely moved to be talking about her. One of the best parts of the show back when I used to watch it, and her leaving the show feels like a pretty tremendous blow for it because at this point there are so few beloved core characters left that with Walking Dead's ratings, still strong but slipping. I wonder when people say enough is enough, which brings us to the Walking Dead movie, which we knew was coming, but they had a very brief teaser that confirmed that Andrew Lincoln's Rick Grimes, who left the show last season, is back for the movie, and it'll be a theatrical release, not a TV movie as previously reported, with Universal distributing. So look for that in the next couple of years.
Okay. Next up, they had a panel for The Witcher. This is the Netflix is online, so I'll link that in the show notes. But what did you guys think?
We saw clips as well. And I think a lot of people were expecting, since this is a Netflix production, for it to have maybe Game of Thrones level filmmaking going on. And it doesn't. It does not look like an HBO show. It looks like a really well-made sci-fi channel show, like something along the level of The Expanse. It looks like a TV show. So if you're looking for something grand and cinematic, I think you may be disappointed. But if you're okay with The Witcher looking like, a really polished television program with all the TV limitations you'd expect from a non... I've played the video games, so I was more familiar with this world already. HT, what did The Witcher look like to you as somebody who's unfamiliar with this world?
I was intrigued. I have to say I have very little... It did pique my interest quite a bit. I only knew that, Henry Cavill... I was actually quite taken with the other female characters that were introduced at the panel and in the trailer. And there seemed to be a few, disparate plot threads that were being woven in that I didn't quite understand, but it check out the first episode for it. It was it was grim, it was gritty, but it had that level of fantastical escape that I would seek out in a fantasy series. So I liked it. I think I was not as impressed by the clips as I was by the trailer. They cut together a really good trailer, but I'd probably check out that first episode. Yeah,
the trailer's more impressive than the clips because the trailer has all the shots they clearly have finished, including an encounter with a giant crab monster. And since The Witcher is about a witcher, which in his fantasy world is somebody who is trained to hunt monsters for a living, the trailer by default is most impressive because it actually has a monster in it. Clearly the rest of the monsters aren't ready for prime time, aren't ready to be shown.
Yeah.
But it was it's very interesting. There's a female showrunner, Lauren Hisrich is the showrunner, and the games and the novels have a lot of male and female characters, and the games are famous for having tons of sex, and so I'm very curious to see a female gaze brought to this, and the trailer leans heavily on this with an incredibly shirtless Henry Cavill, looking enormously buff, even more so than he was as Superman.
Arm the size of my head.
Wow.
So if you're looking for, I feel like this show clearly knows that the guys are coming for the monster fighting and the sword fights, and the girls are going to see these compelling female characters and Henry Cavill looking enormously ripped. So I feel like it is trying to be fantasy for everyone.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about something that both of you were left really kind of shocked and excited by, and that is the Netflix TV adaptation of Dark Crystal. H2, tell us about it.
So Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, is a Netflix series that will act as a prequel to Jim Henson's 1982 classic. And I have to say, I recently saw the original film, and so I don't have quite the nostalgia for it, and I was a little bit ambivalent towards it. I am a fantasy fan, but I found that it to be a little bit too, not incomprehensible, but a little hard to just kind of get interested in and get involved in. But I did not find that problem at all with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. So this panel included executive producer Lisa Henson, as well as director Louis Leterrier, who directs all 10 episodes of the series, as well as stars Taron Egerton and Mark Hamill. And at first, the panel kind of seemed like a little bit of an excuse for Mark Hamill to ham it up and be his Comic-Con's favorite personality. And they kind of hammered that in with an award that they handed to him at the end of the panel, which was a new award. It's the Comic-Con Icon Award. And he talked a lot about just the voice acting process, and Louis Leterrier talked about the difficulty of working with practical puppetry, which is something they emphasize with this new series to be bringing back. The Jim Henson Company, too, is very deeply involved with this through Lisa Henson.
But it's not just like a few practical puppets. It seems like it's mostly practical, right?
It's mostly practical with the exception of CGI backgrounds and to remove the puppeteers. But it's all practical. It's very much that tactile effect of practical puppets. Something that Jim Henson dreamed of when he first kind of started doing and working on the Dark Crystal. So after the panel, which was very short and not really much came of it, they actually surprised us with a screening of the first episode of the Dark Crystal. And I was bowled over by this episode.
It's so good.
It's so good. Not only does it look so gorgeous and lavish and rich, I was just shocked by how easily I fell into the story and was transported by the story. It's a little bit hard to summarize without sounding like a crazy person because it's very high fantasy. It's it's set in the world of Thra, which we are introduced to in the Dark Crystal. And it's a prequel series that takes place many years before the events of the film, and it follows these Gelflings, which are the main protagonist characters, kind of humanoids.
Kind of Hobbit-elf hybrids.
Hobbit-elf hybrids, who are these peace-loving creatures, and live in this in this naivete that the Skeksis, the villains of the film, are their, protectors, the lords of the crystal, who have actually tricked the augur, the original protector of the crystal, into giving them the crystal so that they can drain it of its life force and achieve immortality through that. But after the thousands of years of draining that crystal, it's actually tainted the crystal and thus has started to start the darkening through all of Thra. And these three Gelflings, who are the main protagonists, the first played by Taron Egerton, the second by Anya Taylor-Joy, and the third by Natalie Emmanuel, start to kind of discover that something is amiss. And it is amazing how it juggles all of these plot threads and this sprawling ensemble while introducing us to this really rich world, and still is just completely enthralling. I was just gripped from beginning to end. The action is done so well. The environments are some of the most lavish, gorgeous fantasy environments I've seen, the warm, rich colors, and I really love the designs too that are more sort of organic and natural, in a way that you don't really see in a lot of fantasy. I feel like it's something that's very earthen and tied to this more, mystic world of Thra, versus the Skeksis designs. They're kind of almost eldritch and macabre in their modernity. And I was telling Jacob this as I was running out of the episode to write up about it. It kind of reminded me of Studio Ghibli films, specifically Princess Mononoke, and in that sort of clash between modernity and the natural order, and how modernity comes in as a sort of seemingly benevolent force, only to start to transform and taint the world around them. And it's that clash between that modernity and that spirituality that becomes a sort of a main theme in this series. Something I didn't really see in the original film, and something that really captured me when I was watching this series, this episode.
Yeah, when this series was first announced, I was not excited because I've seen Dark Crystal when I was very young, but I have no nostalgia for it. I haven't seen it in 25 years, and I just wasn't thrilled at the concept of revisiting a world that I had no love for. But about 15 minutes in the first episode, I was really hooked, and especially impressive because there are probably 24 main characters introduced in this first episode. Half a dozen major plot lines and subplots. It's a Game of Thrones-esque labyrinth of characters, relationships, and situations, but I was so immediately sucked in and so immediately understanding of where everybody fit into this puzzle, mainly because the voice acting is so good, and if occasionally you may think that the puppets are maybe a little less expressive than the human face, the voices are directed in such a way that they fill in the blanks of whatever puppet. If a puppet doesn't have the right emotion to express on its face, the voice acting is filling in the blank for you in a way that I found really fascinating. It took me a few minutes to adjust to it, to understand that I was watching puppets. And if Jim Henson's original dream was to tell full-fledged actual stories with puppet characters, and as an art form, as a medium, and he never quite, saw that happen within his lifetime, this feels like the continuation of that dream, because these puppets are fully realized characters who are three-dimensional. They run, they fight, there's genuinely touching romantic scenes. They scream for their lives when they're in danger. They have comic relief. They betray each other, and it's to see these characters who are being brought to life by puppeteers and voice actors being treated with the reverence we would treat a actual actor in a dark fantasy epic. I've never seen it pulled off to this extent before. The closest comparison is a completely different genre. It's Anomalisa, the Charlie Kaufman directed film that was a surreal drama with puppets. This is similar to that in that it uses puppets very seriously as an art form to tell complete stories without the artifice of saying, "Hey, look, they're puppets," which is how most of these stories have been told in the past. Even the Muppets, which I love, is still ultimately about, "Hey, look, they're furry creatures. Aren't they funny?" Whereas this is, no, these are full-fledged characters, not humans. They're fantastical fantasy creatures. In a world we were asking you to care about, in a plot line we were asking you to care about. And after episode 1, I care a lot. I'm very excited to see more.
Well, I was always more of a Labyrinth person than the Dark Crystal person, but you guys have gotten me really excited for this. You can watch the trailer for the Dark Crystal on the website. I'll link it in the show notes. And that comes out on August 30th. So next up was Game of Thrones. This is a panel that originally the showrunners were supposed to show up at, but they pulled out because...
they claimed scheduling conflicts, but I believe that they realized they did not want to face the Comic-Con crowd after the divisive final season. And this was the first. The head of Comic-Con programming came out beforehand and did a very coded speech about how we all respect each other's fandoms, we all respect each other as human beings, and we should remember that because this is Comic-Con where we celebrate this stuff. And it was very... The message was not lost of don't be a dick. And I've never seen that at any panel, anything before, and it was very unusual. Especially since the panel that followed was very much another victory lap panel with no news worth reporting, and with the showrunners not there, no questions about the final season and storytelling choices. Just very much questions like, if your character had lived, what would they have done next? What was your favorite line from the series? The one thing that got kind of blown out of proportion is that Colin Hill, who plays Varys in the show, said a really eye-roll-worthy thing where he said that clearly the fans loved the final season based on Hall H, and that the media were the ones who created the idea of the final season being widely hated, which made me roll my eyes. But I think that Twitter, especially from people who weren't in the room, blew it out of proportion to the point where they were saying the entire Game of Thrones cast was united and saying that critics led a hate campaign, which is not what they said. And I found it really annoying in real time to watch Twitter take a single dumb comment from an actor speaking for himself and just social media rolling with it in all the wrong directions. So that was the one piece of news that came out of the panel, and even then it was pitched in the exact wrong direction. So on the record, as somebody who's in the room, it was not nearly as Trumpian as Twitter's making it sound.
I feel like Conleth Hill has been putting his foot in his mouth regarding Game of Thrones for a while now anyways.
He said this while trying to walk back previous statements about not liking Season 8. So, and if you listen to him, follow Hill on the rest of the panel, every other word out of his mouth is a non sequitur of him being a total eccentric weirdo, which is lovable most of the time, except when he's giving out information people really want. So I wouldn't even quote him as speaking for anyone except for whatever Conleth Hill is thinking for that in that second of his existence. So my on the record thing here is that I would not go around with irresponsible headlines announcing Game of Thrones hates the media, because that's not what happened at that panel.
Okay, we have two last big things. You guys both saw the world premiere of different things. Which one should we get to first?
Well, mine wasn't a world premiere.
It's played at film festivals, but you both saw Comic-Con premieres.
Yes.
Which one should we get to first?
I'll do mine first, since mine is the one that's been playing elsewhere. And that's Freaks, a new low-budget genre film from Adam Stein and Zach Lipovsky, Peter?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I am friends with Adam and Zach, and I've been friends with them for many years now. I have not seen this film, and my friendship with them does not affect your review in any way.
I did not know them, which is why Peter sent me to cover this, so I can give you my honest opinion. And my honest opinion is that Freaks is a very good movie. It is about an overprotective father, played by Emil Hirsch, who not let his daughter leave their home. He has it prepared for all kinds of contingencies if something should go wrong. There's guns in the house. There's $1,000 in cash. There's canned food. She's not allowed to interact with strangers. At first, you wonder, is this guy crazy? What's going on? What's going on outside the world? And the movie does a really amazing job of peeling back the layers. And without overselling it too much, it's kind of like if Dogtooth met X-Men. And ultimately, the blend of horror, science fiction, and yes, maybe a little bit of superheroics reminds me a lot of what X-Men New Mutants was apparently shooting for in those early trailers, to the point where there's no reason to even release New Mutants if Freaks exists. It's an incredibly good, dark movie about isolated people, persecuted people, fighting back, and it is dark, it is spooky, it is fun. It has infinite gallons of imagination on a small budget. There are shots where you realize, they bit off more than they can chew with this shot. But I will always take that over, something that's woefully generic but well produced. So, Freaks is hitting theaters next month. It's going to be probably a limited release. I imagine it'll be widely available for streaming, VOD, and whatnot beyond that. And if you're looking for a really good X-Men itch, and you don't want to wait 5 years until Marvel Studios gets around to making something else, and you're disappointed by Dark Phoenix, and you want a story that's really surprising and does something really special with that kind of idea, Freaks is very good.
I'm so happy to hear people are liking this film because Adam and Zach, I first met them because there was this reality series on TV that Steven Spielberg produced that it was called On the Lot, and it was filmmakers competing for a development deal at DreamWorks, and each week they would make these short films, and Adam and Zach were both like my favorites on that show, and they've had careers since then. Zach's done a bunch of like horror movies, which and Adam has, I think he worked for Jimmy Kimmel for some time, making like the on the street stuff, but this really seems like the first time that they have both been really creatively accepted by like just like they've been taking this through to film festivals, and I'm just really happy to see this for them because they're great guys.
I'm happy it was good, especially I was really trepidatious because I'd seen one of Zach's films before, Leprechaun Origins, and with all due respect to him, it's one of the worst films I've ever seen in my entire life. So seeing him rebound with
to be fair, you try to make a film for WWE films and try to make it good.
but to be fair, Freaks is exceptionally good. So I have nothing makes me happier than seeing a filmmaker who's clearly talented finally get a chance to make a movie that's clearly their voice as opposed to a WWE Leprechaun prequel film. So.
And this is totally one of those things where, like, the studios were not giving them the things they wanted to make, and they made this on I don't know how much of a low budget, but a low budget enough that they had creative control, and they were able to do it their way.
Set almost entirely in one house, there's only a handful of characters, and you forget that because you're so wrapped up into it. It's good. It's very good. So
check out Freaks when that comes out. Let's talk about The Boys. We have a review of The Boys on the site right now from our own Chris Evangelista, who calls it a nihilistic, cruel, heartless superhero show we probably deserve. He said it's probably the worst or the most negative review he's ever written.
Really? And he's slammed a lot of movies.
Yeah. So he said this right before you were going, before HT was going to see the Comic-Con premiere of The Boys.
Yeah, I was a little bit disheartened by this review because my interests generally align with Chris's.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I don't agree with him here.
Chris can be wrong sometimes.
Chris can be wrong. I like, they screened the first 2 episodes of The Boys, which is the new Amazon series, based on the comic book of the same name by Garth Ennis and Derek Robertson. And it's developed by Eric Kripke, Evan Goldberg, and Seth Rogen. So they screened the first 2 episodes for us, and it was like a fan screening and the premiere at Comic-Con. And I liked the first 2 episodes quite a bit. The pilot was directed by Dan Trachtenberg, a friend of the pod.
Yeah.
And I can't recall the name of the second episode director, and I apologize for that. But there is a bit of a tonal shift between the first and second episodes. But I liked what I saw in those first 2 episodes. Yes, it's a little bit excessively violent. Yes, it's needlessly cruel at times. But it's kind of a breeze to watch. It's very fun. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It knows what it is. And I really like the performances by stars Carl Urban and Jack Quaid especially. Jack Quaid is kind of our protagonist and the into this world. He plays an innocuous electronics store employee whose girlfriend accidentally gets killed by one of the superheroes of the 7, the sort of godlike figures that are worshipped and are underneath the protection of a giant corporation. And so when his girlfriend gets killed, he doesn't see any justice and gets upset and kind of gets roped into this plot by Carl Urban's character, who is a member of the Boys, Billy Butcher. And the Boys is a vigilante group that seeks to take down these corrupt superheroes. So the first episode was very much an introductory episode and kind of tosses us into this hyper-violent world. But again, it's a breeze to watch. It's very brisk. It's very fun, and there are a lot of nods to the comic, which I didn't get, but I kind of could see whenever the fans would cheer and whoop. Simon Pegg makes an appearance as Huey, Jack Quaid's character's father, and that's a kind of nod to the comics because Huey was originally drawn as inspired by Simon Pegg.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I enjoyed it. I'm sure it gets darker and maybe more nihilistic as it goes on because Chris saw more episodes. But of what I saw, I did have a good time, and it just got picked up for a second season, which the cast and Eric Kripke celebrated at this screening. They introduced the episode before it came on, and they also brought on Giancarlo Esposito, who appears as a guest character at the end of the first season, but will apparently be a recurring character in season 2.
Cool. I have heard it's like much in the same vein as like Kick-Ass. This is either your thing or it's not your thing.
Yes, it definitely is similar to that. I wouldn't say. I think it's a little bit. It's not as intense as Kick-Ass, even. Although Kick-Ass is a feature film, so it has a lot of things happening in its just 2-hour runtime. The Boys does take a little bit more time to breathe, and I do like the characters. I remember reading Chris's review, and he's like, none of the characters are likable. I'm like, I disagree with that. I enjoy Jack Quaid's character. I enjoy the character of Starlight, played by newcomer, well, not a newcomer, she's been in quite a few things, Erin Moriarty. She's sweet, and I enjoy her sort of plot thread as well. So, do
you think her last name is really Moriarty?
I hope so.
I hope so, yeah.
Oh, that's a cool last name.
That would be a really cool name.
So I think what we learned from this is that now I need to watch The Boys when it arrives to be the deciding vote here, right?
Yeah, because you are a fan of the comics, or maybe you read them. I don't know if you're a fan.
I read them. I read most of them, and it's a series that I like with reservations because when The Boys, the comic, is bad, it's really bad, but when it's good, it's really good. And I feel like there's never an in-between with it, so it's very hard for me to call myself a fan, but I also could not put it down, so take from that what you will.
Yeah, I think you probably enjoyed this, Jacob, but also as a person who doesn't know anything about the comics, I have no idea.
Okay, well, we are recording this on Saturday morning. We're about to get ready to go to Hall H for the big day. This is the day where they're having a bunch of stuff, including
Star Trek, Westworld, and then Marvel Studios.
Yeah, Marvel is the cherry on top. Yeah. So we will update this podcast feed with our reactions from there later on today, or maybe it'll be tomorrow. I'm not sure. But look back for that and, go to slashfilm.com to see it before we get to the podcast feed. But you can find all the stories I mentioned on today's podcast linked in the show notes. You can find this podcast published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please rate and review this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. And we'll see you tomorrow.